The rattle of gunfire pierced the quiet frontier town of Willow Creek, Colorado, in 1875. But it wasn't outlaws causing the commotion, it was laughter that followed. Virginia Rose flinched at the sound, knowing without looking that she was once again the subject of cruel mockery from the saloon patrons who found entertainment in her plain appearance and unfashionable clothes. At 22, Virginia had long ago accepted her fate as the town's spinster, destined to live out her days alone in her small seamstress shop at the edge of town. "Look at her scurry like a field mouse," one man called out as Virginia hurried across the dusty main street, her arms full of fabric and supplies. "Bet that's why no man's ever come calling, afraid she might disappear into the floorboards." Virginia kept her eyes trained on the wooden sidewalk, her brown hair falling forward to shield her face from their stares. She wasn't ugly, just unremarkable in every way possible. In a town where the few eligible women were celebrated for their beauty or family connections, Virginia was simply overlooked, dismissed as too plain, too quiet, too nothing. The seamstress shop bell jingled as she pushed through the door, finally allowing herself to breathe. This small space was her sanctuary and livelihood rolled into one. Her fingers, nimble from years of delicate work, immediately began organizing the supplies she'd purchased from the general store, trying to forget the familiar sting of public ridicule. "Miss Rose." A deep voice from the doorway startled her, causing spools of thread to tumble from her hands. Virginia turned to find herself face to face with a stranger, a tall man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. "We're closed," she said automatically, then flushed at her own rudeness. "I mean, I haven't opened yet today, I was just restocking." The man removed his hat, revealing sandy blonde hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Vincent Calloway," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "I've just arrived in town and find myself in need of repairs." He gestured to a tear in his coat sleeve. "The stagecoach driver recommended your establishment quite highly." Virginia took the coat, careful not to let her fingers brush against his. "It's a simple fix. I can have it ready by tomorrow afternoon." "Much obliged, Miss Rose." His eyes lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary, making her uncomfortable. She was accustomed to being invisible, not examined. $1, she said, turning away to write up a receipt. "You haven't even assessed the damage properly." The amusement in his voice drew her eyes back to his face. "I don't need to. It's a straight tier, no pattern matching required. $1. Vincent Calloway's lips quirked upward. "I see why old Pete spoke so highly of your skills." Fair and honest pricing, a rarity in these parts. Virginia handed him the receipt, eager to end the encounter. "Tomorrow after 2 o'clock. Instead of leaving, Vincent leaned casually against the counter. "I hear there's a social at the church Saturday evening. Will you be attending, Miss Rose?" The question was so unexpected that Virginia nearly laughed. "No, Mr. Calloway, I don't attend socials. A shame. I'm new in town and could use a proper introduction to Willow Creek society." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, she noticed. "Then you should ask Miss Emma Whitfield. Her father owns the bank, or perhaps Miss Josephine Miller. She's considered the belle of Willow Creek." Virginia busied herself with organizing thread by color, a task that required no concentration but gave her hands something to do. "I didn't ask about Miss Whitfield or Miss Miller," Vincent said quietly. "I asked about you." Virginia finally looked up, searching his face for signs of mockery. Finding none, she still couldn't bring herself to trust his apparent interest. "Mr. Calloway, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not interested. Your coat will be ready tomorrow." Vincent straightened, placing his hat back on his head. "No game, Miss Rose, just a simple invitation." He tipped his hat. "Until tomorrow." After he left, Virginia stood motionless, her heart beating strangely fast. No man had ever asked her to a social before, at least not sincerely. There had been the occasional cruel prank in her younger years, but she'd learned to avoid such humiliations. This Vincent Calloway was surely up to something, and she had no intention of finding out what. The next day, Virginia worked methodically on the various projects that filled her small shop. Mrs. Henderson's wedding dress for her daughter needed lace attached. Sheriff Davis required new buttons on his Sunday shirt, and 3 different families had brought in children's clothing for alterations as the young ones grew like weeds in springtime. When the bell jingled precisely at 2:15, Virginia knew, without looking up, that Vincent Calloway had returned for his coat. She could feel his presence like a change in barometric pressure. "Right on time, Mr. Calloway," she said, reaching for the neatly folded coat on the shelf behind her. "Good as new." Vincent examined the repair with genuine appreciation. "Impressive work, Miss Rose. Can't even tell it was damaged." He placed a dollar coin on the counter. "About the social, I haven't changed my mind," Virginia interrupted, pushing the coin toward him. "I haven't finished asking," he countered smoothly. "The social isn't until 7. I was hoping you might join me for supper at the hotel restaurant beforehand. Say 5 o'clock." Virginia stared at him in disbelief. Why what? Why are you pursuing this?" "There are a dozen more suitable women in town who would be delighted by your attention." Vincent's expression grew serious. "I've met some of those suitable women already. Miss Whitfield cornered me at the general store to invite me to tea, and Miss Miller happened to be exercising her horse alongside the very trail I was riding yesterday afternoon." He leaned forward slightly. "I find I prefer honest conversation to practiced flirtation." "And you think I'll provide that?" Virginia couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "I think you're the only person in this town who's been straight with me since I arrived." Vincent picked up his coat. 5 o'clock, I'll call for you here. If you're not interested after supper, I'll escort you home and trouble you no further." Before Virginia could formulate a response, he was gone, leaving her staring at the closed door in bewilderment. For the rest of the afternoon, Virginia's mind was in turmoil. She told herself repeatedly that accepting his invitation would only lead to disappointment or humiliation. Yet beneath her practiced cynicism, a small flame of hope flickered that perhaps, just perhaps, his interest was genuine. At 4:30, she locked the shop's front door and retreated to her living quarters in the back. She owned exactly one dress that wasn't practical work attire, a simple blue cotton with a lace collar that she'd made 3 years ago for her mother's funeral. Virginia had never had occasion to wear it since. She washed her face and hands, brushed her hair until it shone, and pinched her cheeks for color. The woman in the small mirror looked back at her with uncertainty, the same unremarkable brown eyes, the same 2 thin lips, the same forgettable features that had earned her the whispered title of Plain Virginia throughout town. "This is foolish," she told her reflection. Yet she still found herself pulling on the blue dress, fastening each button with trembling fingers. At precisely 5 o'clock, a knock sounded at the shop's door. Virginia took a deep breath, unlocked it, and faced Vincent Calloway. His eyes widened slightly as they took in her appearance. "Miss Rose," he said softly, "you look lovely." Virginia searched his face for insincerity but found none. "Thank you," she replied, the words feeling strange on her tongue. Compliments were not something she was accustomed to receiving. Vincent offered his arm. "Shall we?" Walking down the main street of Willow Creek on Vincent Calloway's arm was an experience Virginia would never forget. The stares from townspeople ranged from shocked to amused to outright disapproving. Emma Whitfield nearly tripped over her own feet when she spotted them from across the street, and Virginia caught the unmistakable sound of whispers following in their wake. "People are talking," she murmured, keeping her eyes fixed straight ahead. "Let them," Vincent replied, patting her hand where it rested in the crook of his arm. "It gives them something to do besides complain about the weather." The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Willow Creek, catering primarily to wealthy travelers and the upper echelon of local society. When Vincent requested a table for 2, the maitre d' glanced dubiously at Virginia before leading them to a secluded corner. "I've never dined here before," Virginia admitted once they were seated. "Never. But you've lived here your whole life, haven't you?" She shrugged slightly. "There's never been occasion. A seamstress dining alone would be considered odd, and I've never been invited to join others." Vincent's expression darkened momentarily. "This town seems remarkably set in its ways, All towns are, in my experience. Virginia unfolded her napkin, placing it carefully in her lap. You still haven't told me what brings you to Willow Creek, Mr. Calloway. Call me Vincent, please. He settled back in his chair. I've purchased the old Carson Ranch outside of town, planning to raise horses, quarter horses primarily, though I have a few thoroughbreds for good measure. Virginia's eyebrows rose in surprise. The Carson place, that's nearly 2,000 acres. 2,347 to be exact, Vincent confirmed with a smile. Good water rights, decent grazing land, and close enough to the railroad for convenient shipping. You seem to know your business. I should hope so. I've been working with horses since I was old enough to walk. My father raised them in Kentucky before the war. His eyes took on a faraway look. Lost everything during those years. Had to start over out west. As they ate, Vincent shared stories of his travels across the Western territories, his successes and failures in the horse trading business, and his hopes for the Carson Ranch. Virginia found herself relaxing as the meal progressed, drawn into conversation more easily than she would have thought possible. "You're not what I expected, Miss Rose," Vincent said as they finished their dessert. Virginia tensed slightly. "And what did you expect? Someone less opinionated." His eyes danced with amusement. "You have strong views on everything from railroad monopolies to women's education." "Disappointing, I'm sure," she replied, reaching for her water glass to hide her discomfort. "On the contrary," Vincent leaned forward, "I find it refreshing. Most women I meet either have no opinions at all or carefully align their views with whatever they think I want to hear." Virginia studied him, still not entirely convinced of his sincerity. "And what brings a successful horse trader to pursue the company of a plain seamstress?" "Surely there are women with both beauty and brains to be found." Vincent's expression grew serious. "You truly not see yourself clearly, or is this self-deprecation a defense you've cultivated?" The directness of his question startled her. I see myself precisely as others do." "Then perhaps it's the others whose vision is impaired." Vincent's gaze was unwavering. "When I look at you, Virginia Rose, I see a woman of intelligence, skill, and quiet dignity. Your eyes reveal a depth of feeling you try to hide, and when you smile, which is far too rarely, it transforms your entire face." Virginia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You've known me barely 2 days. Some things don't require extensive study to recognize." Vincent signaled for the bill. "Now about that social, I haven't agreed to attend," Virginia reminded him. "True, but our agreement was that if you weren't interested after supper, I would escort you home and trouble you no further." Vincent's eyes met hers questioningly. "Are you not interested, Virginia?" The use of her first name sent an unexpected thrill through her. Virginia considered her answer carefully, knowing that her response would determine much more than just her plans for the evening. "I am not uninterested," she finally admitted. Vincent's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then I believe we have a social to attend." The church social was already in full swing when they arrived. Lanterns hung from the trees surrounding the churchyard, casting a warm glow over the gathering. A small band played lively tunes while couples danced on a wooden platform constructed for the occasion. Tables laden with food and drink lined one side of the yard, and clusters of townspeople stood in conversation throughout the space. A hush fell over the nearest group as Vincent and Virginia approached. Reverend Williams recovered first, stepping forward with an outstretched hand. "Mr. Calloway, delighted you could join us." His eyes flickered to Virginia with poorly concealed surprise. "And Miss Rose as well, how unexpected." "Wouldn't have missed it, Reverend," Vincent replied smoothly, shaking the man's hand. "Miss Rose was kind enough to accompany me and introduce me to the community." Josephine Miller, resplendent in a pink satin gown that must have cost more than Virginia earned in 3 months, sidled up to them. "How charitable of you, Virginia," she said with a brittle smile. "Though I'm sure Mr. Calloway would prefer to meet people who actually participate in town affairs." Virginia felt herself shrinking inward, the familiar sensation of invisibility creeping over her. But before she could retreat completely, Vincent's hand came to rest at the small of her back, warm and steady. On the contrary, Miss Miller, he said pleasantly, I find Miss Rose's perspective refreshingly honest, helps me see beyond the veneer to the true character of Willow Creek. Josephine's smile froze, then disappeared entirely. She muttered something about needing to check on the refreshments and swept away in a rustle of expensive fabric. Well, Vincent murmured close to Virginia's ear, I believe I've just made an enemy. Despite herself, Virginia laughed. Josephine Miller has never failed to get what she wants. You've damaged her reputation by choosing my company over hers. Her reputation will recover, Vincent replied, guiding Virginia toward the refreshment table, though I suspect mine may be irreparably linked with yours now. Is that concerning to you? Virginia asked, unable to keep the note of vulnerability from her voice. Vincent stopped walking, turning to face her directly. Virginia, the only thing concerning me at this moment is whether you'll do me the honor of dancing the next set with me. The band struck up a waltz, and before she could formulate an excuse, Virginia found herself being led onto the dance floor. She had never danced at a social before, had never been asked, but years of watching from the sidelines had taught her the basic steps. I may step on your feet, she warned as Vincent's hand settled at her waist. I'll risk it, he replied with a grin that made her heart flutter traitorously. To Virginia's surprise, she didn't stumble once as they moved across the floor. Vincent was an excellent dancer, guiding her with subtle pressure and making even her inexperienced steps seem graceful. Around them, the other couples gave them a wide berth, as if the pairing of Willow Creek's most eligible newcomer with its plainest spinster might be contagious. Everyone is staring, Virginia murmured, keeping her eyes fixed on Vincent's shoulder. Let them stare. Perhaps they'll learn something. Vincent's voice was warm with amusement. Look at me, Virginia. Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his. There you are, he said softly. I was beginning to think you'd disappeared behind those downcast eyes of yours. I'm not used to being seen, she admitted. Then it's about time you got accustomed to it, because I intend to see you very thoroughly. The waltz ended, but Vincent didn't release her immediately. Instead, he led her to the edge of the dance floor, where a small gap in the crowd afforded them some privacy. Would you walk with me? He asked, nodding toward the church garden where paths wound between flowering bushes and fruit trees. Virginia hesitated. Going unchaperoned into the garden with a man would certainly set tongues wagging even more than they already were. But looking at Vincent's expectant face, she found she didn't care as much as she should about the town's opinion. Yes, she said simply. The garden was quieter, the sounds of the social muted by distance and the soft rustling of leaves. A nearly full moon cast silver light across the paths, supplementing the few lanterns hung among the trees. They walked in companionable silence for several minutes, Vincent's hand occasionally brushing against hers. I'm leaving for Denver tomorrow, he said finally, stopping beneath an apple tree heavy with unripe fruit. Need to arrange shipment of my horses from Kansas. Virginia nodded, ignoring the sinking feeling in her stomach. Of course, your business must take priority. I'll be gone 2 weeks, perhaps 3. Vincent turned to face her fully. I'd like to continue our acquaintance when I return, if you're amenable. Virginia studied his face in the dappled moonlight. Why me, Vincent? I'm not being self-deprecating. I genuinely want to understand. You could have your pick of women in this town or any other. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. When I was 16, my father took me to a horse auction in Louisville. There was a mare there, not the flashiest animal, nothing like the high-stepping thoroughbreds everyone was bidding on. She was sturdy, well-proportioned, with intelligent eyes and a quiet demeanor. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind Virginia's ear with a gentle touch. My father outbid 3 other men for that mare. When I asked him why, he said, son, that's a horse that will never fail you. She won't win you any races or turn heads at a parade, but she'll work until her heart gives out, she'll weather any storm, and she'll be faithful to the end. Virginia wasn't sure whether to be flattered or offended at being compared to a horse. And that's how you see me. As reliable but unremarkable, Vincent laughed softly. You misunderstand. That mare became the foundation of our breeding stock. Every foal she produced inherited her intelligence, her endurance, her heart. After the war, when we lost everything else, it was her descendants that helped us rebuild. His hand moved to cup Virginia's cheek. Some worth isn't visible at first glance, Virginia. Some beauty isn't obvious until you have the wisdom to recognize it. Virginia's breath caught in her throat. You barely know me. I know enough to want to know more, Vincent replied. I know that when you concentrate on your sewing, you bite your lower lip. I know that despite the town's treatment of you, you speak ill of no one. I know that you have a wit sharper than most men I've encountered, yet you hide it behind quiet courtesy. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Most of all, I know that when I look at you, Virginia Rose, you're the only woman I see, the only one worth seeing. Before Virginia could respond, Vincent lowered his head and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, questioning rather than demanding, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Virginia found herself leaning into it instead, her hands coming up to rest hesitantly on his chest. When they parted, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I'd like to court you properly, Virginia, if you'll have me. The 3 weeks Vincent was away stretched endlessly for Virginia. She tried to maintain her normal routine, opening the shop at 8 each morning, closing at 5, taking meals alone in her small kitchen, but everything felt different. She caught herself smiling at nothing, humming as she worked, looking up expectantly whenever the shop bell jingled. The town's reaction to her evening with Vincent was predictably mixed. Some, like Reverend Williams and his wife, treated her with a new cordiality that bordered on patronizing. Others, particularly Josephine Miller and her circle, became even more cutting in their remarks, though they now took care to make them just out of earshot. Emma Whitfield proved the most surprising. She arrived at the shop 4 days after the social, ostensibly to order a new walking dress. Is it true he kissed you in the church garden? She asked without preamble as Virginia measured her waist. Virginia nearly pricked her with the pins she was holding. I don't believe that's any of your concern, Miss Whitfield. Emma sighed dramatically. Everyone's talking about it. Josephine is positively livid. She had her cap set for Mr. Calloway the moment he rode into town. She twisted to look at Virginia. What I can't understand is why he chose you. The blunt question might have wounded Virginia a week earlier. Now she merely smiled slightly as she continued her measurements. Perhaps you should ask him when he returns. Emma studied her with new interest. You've changed, Virginia Rose. There's something different about you. Virginia didn't respond, but she knew Emma was right. Something had changed not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. Vincent's words, his kiss, his promise to return had awakened something that had lain dormant for years. Hope. On the 18th day after Vincent's departure, Virginia was hemming a pair of curtains when the shop bell jingled. She looked up, needle poised mid-stitch, to find Vincent Calloway standing in the doorway, his hat in his hands and a smile on his face that made her heart turn over. You're back, she said unnecessarily, setting aside her work. I am. Vincent crossed the shop in 3 long strides, stopping just short of reaching for her. How have you been, Virginia? Well enough. She smoothed her skirts, suddenly shy. And your business in Denver, successful. My horses arrive tomorrow, 23 of my best breeding stock. His eyes never left her face. But that's not what I want to talk about right now. Virginia met his gaze steadily. What do you want to talk about? Us. Vincent took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I haven't been able to think of anything else for 3 weeks. There's an us to discuss then? Virginia asked, trying and failing to keep her tone light. I hope so. Vincent raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I meant what I said before I left, Virginia. I want to court you properly. The town will talk. Let them. Your business could suffer if you align yourself with someone so socially inconsequential. Vincent's expression hardened slightly. Anyone who would refuse to do business with me because of who I care for is not someone I wish to do business with at all. Virginia drew a deep breath. I'm afraid. Of what? That you'll come to your senses. That you'll wake up one morning and see me as everyone else does, plain, forgettable, not worth the trouble. Vincent released her hand, but only to frame her face with both of his. Virginia rose. I have traveled from the Atlantic to the Pacific, met women in every territory and state between. Not one of them has captured my interest or my heart the way you have in the space of a few short days. His eyes held hers intently. I see you, all of you, and I find nothing plain or forgettable about what I see. This time when he kissed her, there was nothing hesitant about it. Virginia allowed herself to be drawn into his embrace, her arms winding around his neck as his lips moved over hers with increasing urgency. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing unevenly. Have dinner with me tonight, Vincent said, his voice husky, and tomorrow. And the day after that, Virginia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. People will say you're courting me. Good. Vincent stole another quick kiss. Because I am. The Courtship of Virginia Rose by Vincent Calloway became the primary topic of conversation in Willow Creek over the next few months. Vincent made no attempt to be subtle about his intentions, calling at her shop daily, escorting her to church each Sunday, and taking her on long rides to show her the progress at his ranch. The Carson place was transforming under Vincent's direction. The old farmhouse had been repaired and expanded, new stables constructed, and fencing installed across the property. His horses were magnificent creatures, with powerful haunches and intelligent eyes that seemed to assess Virginia whenever she visited. This one's for you, Vincent told her one crisp October afternoon, leading a chestnut mare from the stable. Her name is Penny. Virginia stared at the beautiful animal in disbelief. For me, but I hardly know how to ride. Then it's time you learned. Vincent helped her mount, adjusting the stirrups to fit her shorter legs. Every rancher's wife should be comfortable on horseback. The casual reference to her as his future wife made Virginia's heart skip, but she said nothing as Vincent began instructing her on the basics of horsemanship. By the end of the afternoon, she was trotting confidently around the corral, feeling a freedom she had never experienced before. As they stabled Penny for the evening, Vincent pulled Virginia into his arms. "You're a natural," he murmured against her hair. "Should have known you would be." Virginia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I never imagined my life could change so completely. For the better, I hope." She tilted her head back to look at him. "Yes, for the better." Vincent's expression grew serious. "It could change even more, you know." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering directly, Vincent took her hand and led her to a bench outside the stable. Once they were seated, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I had this made in Denver," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "It's not fancy, but I thought it suited you, elegant, genuine, with a quiet beauty that reveals itself the longer you look." Virginia stared at the ring, unable to speak. "Virginia Rose," Vincent continued, his voice uncharacteristically nervous, "these past months have been the happiest of my life. I know it hasn't been long, but I'm certain of what I feel for you." He took her hand. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Virginia's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Vincent Calloway." The ring slipped onto her finger as if it had been made for her hand alone. Vincent's kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that made Virginia cling to him. "When?" He asked against her lips. "When what?" "When will you marry me?" "Tomorrow, next week," Virginia laughed, dizzy with happiness. "We should at least give Reverend Williams time to publish the banns." 3 weeks then, Vincent decided, not a day longer. True to his word, Vincent and Virginia were married exactly 3 weeks later in the Willow Creek church. To Virginia's surprise, the small building was filled to capacity with townspeople, many of whom had never spoken more than a passing word to her before. The women who had once mocked her now watched with grudging respect as she walked down the aisle in a wedding dress of her own creation, simple but elegant, with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Vincent waited at the altar, his eyes never leaving her as she approached. When Reverend Williams asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" There was an awkward pause. Virginia had no family to speak for her. From the front pew, Sheriff Davis stood unexpectedly. On behalf of the town of Willow Creek, I do, he said firmly, giving Virginia a nod of respect before sitting down again. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When Vincent repeated his vows, his voice rang with certainty. I, Vincent Calloway, take thee, Virginia Rose, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part. Virginia's own voice trembled slightly as she made the same promises, still scarcely believing that this man, this kind, handsome, successful man, had chosen her above all others. As they were pronounced husband and wife, Vincent swept her into his arms for a kiss that left her breathless and the congregation applauding. Mrs. Calloway, he whispered against her ear as he led her back down the aisle, the only woman I'll ever see. The reception at the hotel was more lavish than anything Willow Creek had witnessed in years. Vincent had spared no expense, importing champagne from San Francisco and hiring a quartet from Denver to provide music. Virginia moved through the crowd on her husband's arm, accepting congratulations from people who had ignored her existence for most of her life. Josephine Miller approached near the end of the evening, her smile tight but her words sincere enough. I wish you both happiness, she said, inclining her head slightly. You've surprised us all, Virginia. Thank you, Josephine, Virginia replied graciously. I hope you find someone who sees you as clearly as Vincent sees me. As the last guests departed, Vincent led his bride to the waiting carriage that would take them to their new home. Happy, Mrs. Calloway? He asked, helping her up. Virginia looked back at the hotel, at the town that had dismissed her for so long, then at the man who had changed everything. Happier than I ever thought possible, she answered truthfully. The ranch house welcomed them with warmth and light. Vincent had hired staff who had prepared the home for their arrival, with a fire crackling in the hearth and fresh flowers in every room. It was larger than any place Virginia had ever lived, yet it already felt like home. Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets of their marriage bed, Vincent traced lazy patterns on Virginia's bare shoulder. Do you know when I first truly saw you? He asked softly. Virginia turned in his arms to face him. When you brought your coat for repair? No, Vincent smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. It was the day before. I saw you walking across the street, head down, while those fools at the saloon laughed. You didn't cry or run, you just kept moving with this dignity that struck me to the core. His arms tightened around her. I watched you go into your shop, and I thought, there's a woman who knows her own worth even if no one else does. Virginia's eyes filled with tears. I didn't, though. Know my worth, not until you showed me. You always had it, Vincent insisted. I just had the good fortune to recognize it when others were blind. He kissed her deeply. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget it again. 5 years later, Virginia Calloway stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching her husband lead their 3-year-old daughter around the yard on a gentle pony. Little Elizabeth squealed with delight as Vincent trotted in circles, one hand firmly on her back to keep her secure. The Calloway Horse Ranch had prospered beyond anyone's expectations, becoming known throughout Colorado territory for the quality of its stock. Virginia herself had gained a reputation as a skilled breeder with an eye for promising foals, her natural affinity for horses proving as strong as Vincent had predicted. The town of Willow Creek had changed its tune completely regarding Virginia Rose Calloway. The women who had once mocked her now sought her friendship and advice, while the men who had laughed at her expense now doffed their hats respectfully when the Calloways came to town. Vincent completed the circuit and brought Elizabeth to the porch steps. Mama, did you see? The little girl called excitedly. I rode all by myself. I saw, darling, Virginia replied, holding out her arms as Vincent lifted their daughter from the pony's back. You're becoming quite the horsewoman. Like you, Mama, Elizabeth declared proudly. Vincent handed the pony's reins to a waiting stable boy, then joined his family on the porch. His arm slipped naturally around Virginia's waist as he dropped a kiss on her head. Like mother, like daughter, he agreed, the two most beautiful horsewomen in Colorado. Virginia leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid warmth of him beside her. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly after Elizabeth had run inside to tell her nurse about her riding adventure. "Regret what?" Vincent's brow furrowed in confusion. "Choosing me." The plain seamstress no one else wanted. Vincent turned her to face him fully, his hands framing her face as they had that day in her shop years ago. "Virginia Calloway, not a day goes by that I don't thank God for the wisdom to see what was right in front of me." His eyes, still the color of summer storms, held hers intently. "You are the heart of this ranch, the heart of our family, the heart of me. There is nothing plain about you, there never was." Virginia rose on tiptoe to kiss him, feeling the same thrill she had experienced the first time. "I love you, Vincent Calloway." "And I love you," he replied, gathering her close. "The only woman I'll ever see.